I use the word posture, but many people in the Alexander Technique world and in related fields don't like to. They think it brings to mind something static. They're certainly right that there are strange and incorrect connotations around the word posture. Today, we'll look at the differences, as well as the connections between the idea of posture and the idea of gesture. I often use posture as shorthand for a broader concept. The word posture calls to mind for the average person what we're working with, which is the body carriage or deportment of a person. Those words are maybe a bit archaic, but they each introduce something interesting. Body carriage is associated with gait, how you walk, and it brings to mind the fact that we are examining a moving object, and the human body is certainly that. Deportment refers to how well you're trained to behave, how you conduct yourself, how you present yourself. While in the broadest sense there are other considerations to deportment, your posture really is a huge part of how you present yourself to others. The word posture evokes this broad idea of how we use and present our body. But let's define posture more technically. For us, a posture is a snapshot in time. You can look at someone and see in that moment how the structures of their body are positioned relative to each other. That is, you can see what their posture is. In that sense, posture is static. However, we can look at someone's posture over the course of a movement, like sitting down into a chair for instance, and we can check to see how their posture changes over the course of the gesture. A gesture is a series of movements. Walking is a gesture, sitting into a chair is a gesture, jumping is a gesture. But we should also be aware that we can make unnamed gestures. For instance, an adjustment to our torso is a series of movements, and so it is a gesture even though we don't have a common name for what that series of movements is. It's also worth considering that preventing, restraining, or arresting a movement is also essentially a form of movement. We can think about rotating a stick. We could rotate it just by pushing on one end, but if we wanted to be more precise in how we rotate the stick, we could plant our finger on one end and rotate the other. By preventing the movement of one part, we can coordinate a more specific overall movement, and so we should not exclude the prevention of movement from our consideration of gesture. This means that basically everything we do is a gesture. Even standing is a gesture. Though standing might seem quite still and motionless, the standing position is achieved through movements, and is kept steady by movements and the prevention of movements. This is where we can see that gesture and posture are very tightly linked. Your posture is in fact the result of the movements that you make. This is to some degree obvious, though it's not necessarily intuitive. We make a series of movements in order to get into a standing position. What movements we make to do that determine how we stand at the end. If you shove your lower ribs forward in order to stand, when you stand you will have a bent back, a bent torso, and you'll essentially be leaning forward. If you decide to pull your lower ribs and lower sternum back faster than your upper sternum when you stand up, you will be seen to stand in a different posture. So while posture specifically refers to the static moment that we are observing of a person, that posture is formed by the dynamic movements of a gesture. We can use a series of moments of posture to assess the performance of a gesture. As we saw before, we can look at the posture of someone throughout a gesture, and we can see how things go right or go wrong by freezing moments and observing how the movements are affecting the overall structure. The system of conscious guidance and control that we explore on this channel trains our ability to gesture, which will positively affect our posture when it's observed. This is essentially the most general thing you can study. General as in the most broadly applicable, because everything we do is done through movement, and so training our ability to gesture is training our ability to perform the basic movements that make up all activities. So when I talk about correcting your posture, I usually mean correcting your ability to gesture. And I don't worry that someone may have incorrect associations surrounding the word posture, because most people will need to change their basic understanding of what posture is in order to improve their posture. That is, their ability to gesture with good posture.